So, yeah, thank you very much, Frank, for your introduction. And it's really good to see all the member states and experts together in this meeting. So, why butterflies? As Joseph said, we want transformational change to achieve the ambition of restoring biodiversity in its entirety and stopping deterioration. Why do we think using butterflies is a good thing in pledges? Well, we think that butterflies are indicators of the health of the environment, and crucially for member states, they respond relatively quickly to environmental change. Not instantly, but we know of cases where if you stop abandonment or you improve the management by grazing or mowing of an existing protected area, or you implement a life project, then you can show results. And you can show results for butterflies because we have thousands of people across Europe who are prepared to go out during the field season and monitor the abundance of butterflies and report their results through the European Biodiversity Monitoring Scheme, EBMS, which is now in almost all member states with support from the Able and Spring projects. So it fulfills the hope that we will be able to demonstrate progress as well as achieve it. Butterflies are also easy to see in the environment. Children love them, adults love them. They resonate with the public. And there is quite a lot of data available for the baseline. So there's data on Article 17 butterflies, on Article 17 butterfly habitats. There are trend data available from the EBMS. And that can also underpin Article 17 data. It does in some member states, and Chris is going to talk more about that. And crucially, we've mentioned that other pollinators, other wild pollinators are at risk. And of course, the strategy, the EU Biodiversity Strategy 2030, does include a target to reverse the decline in pollinators. Unfortunately, several of them are not listed on the Habitats Directive, but we do have an EU red list of bees. We're getting other red lists too. So if you focus on grassland habitats for butterflies, as many of you member states want to do in your prioritised action frameworks, there will be those wider benefits, both for the climate, because grasslands are carbon sinks, and also for a wide range of species, including birds, of course, which eat lots of caterpillars. So just to make clear that we need to focus not only on adult butterflies. So grassland strips, planted by farmers and so on, are useful nectar for all sorts of insects. But really, to restore butterflies, you need to focus on all 4 life stages. So the adult butterflies need the vegetation structure and the nectar, and they need niches in which they can lay their eggs. Here you see some lay them singly, some lay them in quantity, large tortoiseshell on the tree. And then the caterpillars and the larvae. So you need all 4 life stages to be supported to deliver results for butterflies. So just to recap on what Frank said, the status improvement target, very important to achieve non-deterioration. We know, and I'll share some figures later, that a lot of the listed Habitats Directive butterflies are declining. And it would be great if we could have some measures in place to restore, say, 30% of Habitats Directive butterfly species. They are almost all in unfavourable status at EU and member state levels at the moment, often with a declining trend. And several of them, including those endemic to specific countries, are also threatened with extinction. So there are red lists at EU level. That was done in 2010 and is being updated now. There's one at Mediterranean butterflies, and there are several at member state level. So if you include appropriate measures as envisaged in the pledge format and finance the delivery of those, specific pledges to improve butterfly species can make a big difference, and you will be able to show it before 2030. And it will help to reverse a decline in pollinators. So here's a table that shows the proportion of the different habitats directive butterflies that are in unfavorable status. And as you see, some of them are really near extinction and very few are in favorable, but those that are, particularly for grassland, those give an indication of what can be done to help. So I'll leave that there for a moment. And Frank showed a couple of very nice slides of butterflies that could be targeted for non-deterioration. Here's a map showing the status in different countries. The very pale is none of them are in favourable status, and the dark green are more than 60%, and everything in between. And of course, the colours reflect things like the Alps and so on, alpine butterflies, and also the Mediterranean. Some of these areas are data deficient for other species, but for habitats directive species, there's quite a lot of data. If you look at grassland species specifically, the situation is fairly dire across much of Europe, with only 20% in large swathes of Europe in favourable status. Red listing, there was a paper by Dirk Mays and others integrating national red lists to help prioritise conservation actions for European butterflies, and that shows that there are many species in Central and Eastern Europe where red listed butterflies need more attention. And let's go back to that. Those red list papers are available. Looking at the work done by German naturalists, we know that pollinators more broadly through biomass research over 27 years in Germany has shown a shocking 75% decline. And the Spring project, which is led by Joseph and UFZ with partners, and implementing the EU pollinator monitoring framework, is aiming to strengthen pollinator recovery through indicators and monitoring. And of course, strengthening recovery requires action. And so focusing on butterflies in the first instance where there's good data will point us to where positive action can also help other pollinators. And it's urgently needed. Pollination is an economic service as well as a delight to those of us who are out in the field.
Bizonyos fajoknak igen. Tehát lehet mondani lárvák, peték, bábok. Bizonyos fajoknak.
So protected area targets, I think the Mentimeter was interesting. Managing the existing is a really important thing to do to help achieve the targets. If we manage the existing protected areas better and introduce grazing and mowing to stop abandonment, and we strictly protect some of them from intensification, then that will help to restore butterfly species across Europe. And Sam is going to talk more about management, and Chris is going to talk more about monitoring. So turning to the protected area target, which, as others have said, is synergistic with the species target, there are thousands of Natura 2000 sites, nationally protected areas, and wider landscape areas that host butterflies. And the poor status of the species, which is demonstrated in Article 17 reports and from EBMS abundance data, highlight the importance of improving management of existing protected areas and in some cases expanding or adding to the network to improve connectivity and complementing it with measures including in CAP strategic plans. So if you increase dialogue with butterfly experts, hopefully incorporating butterflies in PA pledges will make a real difference for biodiversity. Here is a table showing the Grassland Habitats Directive habitats important for butterflies. Many of them are also important for other pollinators. There's an interesting EEA paper on this. They're mostly in U2 and the minuses show declines. So really we can't wait any longer. If you look back at the 2012 Article 17 reports, the picture wasn't quite as bad as this. It was quite bad then, but it's declined even further. And if these rates of decline continue, by 2030, grassland butterflies will be in even more dire a state than they are now, and other pollinators will be threatened too. So really it is a challenging time. We recognise it's really difficult, but the ambition is there, the political mandate is there, and so action supported by data is really important. Here's the prevalence of threats that has been analysed by Chris van Swaay from the Article 17 reports, and you'll see that there are 385 entries which show abandonment of grassland management is adversely affecting butterflies. Intensive grazing or overgrazing is really important. Use of plant protection chemicals, conversion, fertilization, and forest issues. There's the data attached to the background note in more detail for member states, and these are member states reports, so it's in a way known what needs to be done, the challenges in doing it, and their motivation, money and expertise is really important. So in conclusion, we think today and tomorrow are opportunities to help develop the pledges by firstly exploring which butterfly species are most in need of further measures, discussing criteria, considering what measures will improve status, thinking about how to strengthen the protected areas and enhancing the network, especially improving the management of existing PAs, and supporting and enhancing monitoring to fill gaps and to support adaptive management of sites. And I'm really pleased that later on today we'll also share practical experience of implementation of the French National Species Action Plan for butterflies. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have very constructive dialogues with butterfly experts over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And we move right away to Simona Bonelli. She will talk about the role of protected areas for butterflies and their habitats. And after this, we have the chance for questions and answers. And also thank you very much to answering all the other questions already in the chat, by the way, by Frank. So that's really good to have. So you can also look at the chat. Some things have been solved somehow this way. Okay, so Simona, are you ready?
Yes.
No, please go ahead. So share the screen. Oh, perfect. Looks. And now we need, oh yeah. Now it's slide 4 now and preview still. Okay, that's full screen.
Oops. Sorry. Try again.
So now I can't see anything. No. So it has been there. Okay, now full screen, and then it should work. Perfect, Simona.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's perfect now. It's slide number 1. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting me to contribute to these 2 crucial days for our butterfly. I'm Simona Bonelli from Butterfly Conservation Europe, and also from Italy, from Turin University. I've been working with sorry, can't move. Okay, there is a little bit of delay, I think. I've been working in the framework of Butterfly Conservation Europe since the beginning, working on many European projects, as well as at a national level, working on distribution data, Article 17 reporting. We produce also the red list for Italian butterflies, the checklist, and we contribute also with our national agency to participate to pollinator initiative. And recently, with other colleagues, we started with a butterfly monitoring scheme in Italy, which successfully is increasing day by day since just 2 years ago. And at the same time, we decided to establish a butterflies national association to put out together our efforts and expert through Italy that host a huge number of biodiversity species and butterflies in particular. So my talk today is about protected areas. That member states have to select, and we know that on butterfly, at least, we have the knowledge enough to suggest some scientific approach to individuate the new protected areas and try to overcome the pledge. Of course, all the member states are not at the target. In Italy, for example, we have almost 21% of protected area terrestrial territory under protection, and we know some general criteria that was already established by the European Commission that is a guide to select new protected areas. So I show you now some scientific approach that we may use. Butterflies could be a very guidelines in selecting new protected areas, since they will for sure benefit on new protected areas, since most of them are habitat specialists, not so mobile despite to be flying insects, and very specialist also in terms of food plant. Most of them are, for example, are monophagous. There is a quite large number of butterflies population that are covered at the European level, that are covered by Natura 2000 network, but often this Natura 2000 and the protected areas in general are fixed in the territory. They are not expected to move. So this is the opportunity to move the boundary, they redraw them. Often are too small, considered too small for successfully restore a viable population of butterflies, and too many times are not properly managed. So the approaches that I just propose you to discuss and to inspire member states in choosing new area are most scientific approach on different cases, and also a couple of examples in which there is not the need to draw new protected areas, but there is the strongly need to manage existing one, avoid strong anthropic impact, or the opposite, the abandonment and reforestation. Okay, the first example is the easiest. This, for example, is Vlinderstichting, one of the species you mentioned in 90 meter, which is threatened whatever in Europe and in Italy as well. These butterflies are very super specialists, monophagous, it depends on ants, it depends on a habitat, which is threatened itself. The species is, in particular in Italy, for example, is now scattered in distribution. Very few and small isolated population are still existing. Okay, in that case, what we can do, we can try to cover with protected areas as much as population we can, and using as baseline a very high resolution distribution data that we had, I think, in any European countries, but in Italy for sure we have. These butterflies, we can use the approach to draw a buffer around the population to ensure the long-term survival. This species is also interesting because it is often in co-occurrence with the Lopinga achene, with Maculinea fengaris, Alcon, and Eupheidria saurinia, threatened and habitat-rated species or red list species. Totally different kind of approach we need, for example, in the case of Papilio alexander. This species is one of the alpine species, which is very mobile species. At the moment, all the population, almost all the population are under protection in Italy, are under Natura 2000 or protected areas. But we know this mobile species is threatened by climate change and is expected to move. And the movement will be by stepping stones to areas with suitable habitat. This species is very mobile when it's adult, but it's monophagous at the instar stage. And so what we have to do in that case, we have to ensure the long term of conservation, mapping the suitability, producing a suitability map to select suitable areas, not only for now, but especially for the future, for the close future, and studying in field the possibility to draw some corridors to connecting the present and futures areas. So we are doing that with the collaboration of Parco Alpi Liguri inside an Interreg project, since this species is in the border between Italy and France. So in that case, the approach is to use high resolution models and to cooperate with the neighbor member states to ensure the long-term survival of the species. This is another case in which, again, we can approach with models, and this is one of the cases of well-preserved species, Parnassus apollo. You can see the number of population we still host in our alpine region, in the Italian Alps. And this species is at the moment in alpine region, Italian alpine region, well preserved, but you know that in the rest of Europe is often declining and threatened, and we have to ensure, again, not the protection now, but the protection for the close future. In that case, we may work on what we have, on the population we have, and working on establish a favorable reference value for the population, and from that, we may assess a favorable number of sites we have to put under protection. We tried to do this kind of work with our National Agency for Environmental Research, and we published this approach recently, and it's available on the web. There are other different approaches we may suggest from different species. For example, in Italy, we have in our Italian red list, most of the endangered species are endemic species. So the national responsibility is very huge. So what we need to do in that case, we need to write a specific action plan for this specific species, Poliomotus genergentis, humedase, or there are also other species that are very, very localized, and we have to write and to manage as soon as possible sites with these species. Not only to draw, it's not important only to draw, to assess the protected areas, but for all of them is crucial the management. Another approach we can use, that could be inspired by butterflies, and as already Sue and Frank and also Joseph told, butterflies are often umbrella species and are co-occurring with the other pollinators. In particular, we have the case of the habitat 6210, which is not a threatened habitat, but it is an habitat that was considered crucial for pollinators in general. This is an area in Apennine, in north part of Apennine, that is full of butterfly and pollinator species. And in that case, the problem of this kind of habitat is usually the abandonment of traditional agriculture. And we need to work on this kind of habitat, I think, or at least that is what butterflies suggest, since in this case we will cover a long list of other pollinators before to have the list of species of pollinators that occurs there, before to have the idea about their trend. So we have to use butterflies, and in particular we may select one species. In that case, for example, Euphoidria saurinia, the provincialis form, which occurs in this kind of habitats, could be a typical species, an umbrella species that could be used to select such kind of new protected areas. Okay, ideas come from species that are suffering not for the lack of protected areas, but for the lack of management. This is Lycaena dispar. The species, this is a wetland species that in Italy became from wetland species a species connected with riceland, since riceland are now a valuable substitute of natural wetland that disappeared in the last century. So what's happened now? The species occurs in the rice field, and rice field is often an ecological trap. And pesticides as the first threat for these species. So what we have to do in that case, what Lycaena dispar can told us, okay, we have to work with, of course, with farmers, and we have at least inside Natura 2000, we used the money to identify a suitable management that could be possible, because we have some cases in which Lycaena dispar, very high population, very good population of Lycaena dispar are inside rice field. It's possible, but we need to obtain, of course, money to work with farmers, and maybe use the aesthetical value of this butterfly that could catch the interested of farmers and consumers in general. And the last example is the opposite. Seronymphidippus is a species that is strongly declined everywhere. In Italy, still occurs in the continental region, and where is quite abundant, as you can see that from the number of the written in the window market recapture release studies, but is an unfavorable state of conservation, since the habitat Mollignetum, which is 65, 10, 40, 30, it depends, is something in between, is suffering of abandonment. and we lost several populations inside the Natura 2000 in continental Italian region, just because we didn't manage the habitat. We have the knowledge enough to write an action plan, to write a plan to give these species the opportunity to survive. But we need to quickly manage this area, and where already the population became already extinct, we may also think on reintroduction, since the species is very, very low mobile species, and this situation is similar to Fengaris teleus, small population isolated one from the other, so inbreeding and short-term decreasing is of course expected. This species as well is often co-occurring with Lopinga kina and Maculina teleus, and the habitat as well is an habitat, Annex 1 of Habitat Directive, threatened in itself. So in that case, we have no need of new protected areas, but we have to manage to avoid reforestation. We have also to consider that these species, as well as teleus, for example, are in the southern parts of their full range of distribution, and we know that in that case, population are often more prone to become extinct, more vulnerable. Okay, at the end, that's crucial, but we have the opportunity through Butterfly to monitoring results of our protected areas implementation or management. And monitoring butterflies, despite I'm from Italy, so we have a huge diversity, is often also more than feasible. It's quite simple and also expensive, and that means working together, integrating citizen science to specialists to ranger, for example, and butterfly expert. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope to be useful in inspiring the discussion in breakdown section today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simona. It was a great overview of all the different challenges we have to face, so very nicely made. And you also stayed nearly in time, which is also great. So we have some time for question and answers. So maybe ideally you just use the raise hand function again on the bottom, or otherwise you can also look at the chat. I first read the first question in the chat, which is by Monteo van der Sluis. You mentioned the need for species action plans. Is there enough cooperation between Italian regions? And is there also cooperation across boundaries?
Is for me the question?
That's for you the question, yes.
Yes, we need to exactly. We need to work together among regions. In Italy, the biodiversity is managed, like in Germany, in different regions, but in particular, some species are cross-boundary. So we strongly need, for example, for Alexander, it's crucial to work together with the neighbor, but we can, because there is also money from European Commission through Interact project, for example, and connection must be placed, must be put in. I strongly believe that.
And is it ongoing already? You have cooperation between Italian regions? Ongoing?
Yes, it is ongoing in the project of Papilio Alexander. All the 4 protected areas are working together for this species, and also the French part is already working inside the Interreg. Yes, this is a good example.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Please go ahead. Laszlo, you're the next one.
Thank you, Simona. Very nice, very interesting.
Grazie.
My question is,
Hi,
have you maybe information or results from species reintroduction in Italy?
No, we have never reintroduced any species. Okay, we lost only one species, which is Lysina elle, but very, very many years ago. Okay, after that we haven't any species became lost from Italy, from the whole nation. We lost a lot of population, but at the moment we never a reintroduction. I wrote a reintroduction project for Oedipus, but was not founded, and for the moment
was not founded. Yes, we have lost Parnassus apollo in the last 25 years in the Romanian Carpathians, and I think it is possible to reintroduce these species from specimens from Tatra Mountains or from Balkans, from Bulgaria. But we have not expertise in these kind of problems.
North and Central Europe have reintroduced many times different species, no? Arion, Dispar, not always successfully.
Parnassus apollo also in the Mosel and other parts from the Western Germany. But I ask you, I think you have work in this direction.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christine.
Okay, another option for future collaboration between Romania and Italy in this case, but it'll nicely cooperate anyhow. Any more questions or comments? There was one question, of course, will the presentations be made available for the ones from today? I guess it will be the case, I think so, but maybe Theo can answer this one, or Sue or whoever. I think it would be a good idea to have this, let's say, somehow for download, that we just really can also check all the contents.
Yeah.
Joseph, maybe we may also mention that at the European level, there is available a data set about functional threats on butterflies, which is important, and most of the species have already the barcoding analyzed. In Italy, we also have a project barcoding Italian butterflies, and for reintroduction, and also for planning the protected areas, the genetic diversity. In Italy, for example, we have a strong diversity from Apennine to Alps, for example, but in the case of butterfly, we have a lot of information about it at European level, at least, to work on.
That's also the offer to all the member states representatives here in the meeting, that you always can come back to Butterfly Conservation Europe and the entire team to get more details also about these issues. And Sue has raised her thumb about the availability of the presentations. So that's great. So thank you once again. Any more questions? If this is not the case, we are exactly in time now for the short coffee and tea break. So let's have 15 minutes of break right now. And we come back then, and then the Mentimeter will start. Maybe Theo then takes over as a start at 10:55 or 9:55 or 11:50, wherever you are in the time zone, but in 15 minutes from now. So enjoy your break and see you in a moment.
Thanks very much, Joseph.
Welcome back, everybody. I assume most people are back or they are coming back soon. Let me briefly share with you the result from the previous Mentimeter question. In total, over 60 people participated and they answered on the priority to focus protected area targets, to improve the quality of current sites by better habitat management, reduce pressures on wildlife by improving the wider environment, including buffer zones, and thirdly, enhance connections between sites through corridors or stepping stones. Well, time to move on to the next question. Next question is also a ranking question. Which criteria do you feel are the most suitable for member states to prioritize species for status improvement pledges? Which criteria are most suitable to prioritize species for status improvement pledges? And it's still the same link, of course, as I've posted in the chat before. Ten people have responded so far. Votes are coming in. So two criteria stand out, the umbrella effect. So in other words, not only the butterfly species themselves, but also the other species that you will protect through your measures, or the habitats that are conserved through the measures. And second, the species with the highest risk of extinction. And then, of course, also the national responsibility for particular species, I suppose for endemic species or nearly endemics. Well, thank you. Already 45 people responded here. Let me hand over back to Joseph again. And people can still contribute to the questionnaire in the Mentimeter. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you, Theo. I just gave it a try to do the kind of, let's say, selection twice, and if the system, let's say, forbids you to do this, which is quite good to know. Otherwise, you can do many votes as one person. That's the kind of try I gave. Okay, now I'm really happy to have Sam here again. It's our chair of Butterfly Conservation Europe, who will talk about managing butterfly populations and their habitats, current state of knowledge, lessons learned, and recommendations. So, Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see that?
It's a preview still.
Oh, right. On my screen, it's okay. Again. Something's gone wrong here, I'm afraid.
You're still in time, though. No worries.
Yeah, no. But it's. I'm really sorry about this. It won't let me share. It's not giving me permission to share. Oh dear, oh dear.
Try the reading view on the bottom to the right. You have an open book. Try that one instead.
Where is that? So at the minute, it's just saying connecting, and it's not allowing, nothing's happening. Yeah, apparently Thesia can take over.
Okay, so we swap and make Chris first, and then you as next one. Would that be okay?
I think she's going to try and put my.
Yeah, I'm opening the presentation, so I will start in 1 second.
You know, you're much better in the field than in the computer, yeah. Maybe.
Thesia, are you there?
Yes, just 1 second, because it's quite heavy to open the PowerPoint, so it's taking me a minute.
Oh.
Perfect.
Okay. So can I control this now, or will you have to?
You will have to tell me to go to the next slide.
Right. Okay. Okay. Right. So I'll do my best to work through this now. So in a 15-minute talk, I can only really give you some general outline principles of managing habitats for butterflies. But first, we need to understand something about their ecology and their ecological requirements. And as Sue mentioned in her talk, you have to manage for the whole life cycle. Next slide, please. Okay. And to most people, people think of the nectar sources or other sources of nutrients as being particularly critical. But most studies actually suggest that the supply of larval host plants is actually the critical thing, or host ant in the case of Phengaris butterflies. Could you click on? Yeah, so it's the supply of host plants that is actually indeed critical. And they also need to be growing in a particular condition, often a preferred growth form or particular microhabitat. So in actual practice, only a subset of host plants is actually utilized. Next slide, please. And Simona mentioned the word habitat specialist butterflies. Many of our threatened species are indeed habitat specialists. This means that they get all their resources from the same habitat type, maybe improved grassland or woodland. And we can illustrate this quite nicely with Euphydryas aurinia, which has a single host plant, as indeed many habitat specialist species. And in this case, it's Succiza pratensis. Click on, please. And the selection here is for host plants which tend to be large with large leaves to accommodate a large batch of eggs. Click on, please. And the reason for that is because the larval web has to have sufficient food plant to feed on. Click on, please. And eventually those caterpillars will disperse and find their own food plants. But there is clearly a subset of Succiza pratensis food plants which is utilized by this species. So it may seem a really obvious thing, but any management for butterflies should aim to maintain, restore, create a specific habitat that species that species prefers. So click on, please. And we've already noted that grasslands is the single most habitat for butterflies. Click on, please. And 57% of European species utilise that habitat, though the woodland and scrub, heath, fen and bog are also important. Click on, please. And we've already made this point already. Semi-natural grasslands are dependent on management to maintain them. and again, it's very obvious, but agricultural intensification, whether it's through ploughing, fertilizers or pesticides, is still a pretty important threat, and that habitat could be permanently lost. Click on, please. But, and we've all seen this already too, abandonment is the single biggest threat to grassland butterflies, without a doubt. It might temporarily lead to an increase in populations of butterflies as livestock pressure is reduced, but in actual fact, eventually that breeding habitat will be lost, and the habitat will turn to scrub and eventually to woodland. So it is clearly a big issue. And next slide, please. And clearly, the best way of maintaining that are through active pastoral systems, whether that be livestock grazing or hay cutting, to maintain those habitats. But as we know, right across Europe, there are plenty of examples of socio-economic conditions having a significant impact on whether those systems can be maintained. And I don't suppose that's going to change anytime soon. Okay, next slide, please. Restoration is being mentioned as part of the biodiversity strategy. One of the things that I have a lot of experience of doing this work on grasslands, and it can be extremely effective in restoring grassland habitats, but it is worth remembering it's actually quite expensive to do that. Removing scrub and woodland is expensive work. Click on, please. And the reason obviously is if you are cutting scrub and woodland down, it costs a great deal of money to do that. Click on, please. As I say, it can be very effective, but the other thing you really need to think about before doing restoration is how you can maintain that habitat once it's been restored. And perhaps sometimes we've been guilty of just doing the restoration without thinking how we might maintain that. Okay, next slide, please. So we mentioned about species having different requirements, and an important principle of managing for butterflies is to manage for variety. Click on, please. And in grasslands, that often translates to actually the fact that species have different turf height requirements. This data is from the UK, but I guess you could apply it similarly to other parts of Europe. Basic principle here is that there are some species that require short turf, some species require medium height turf, some require longer turf, may require scrub as well. So in order to maintain a wider suite of species as possible, you do need to manage for variety. Click on, please. And again. Click on again. So, and obviously livestock grazing is the best way of providing that variety, or one of the best ways anyway. And there are a whole series of variables: livestock type, grazing intensity, timing or seasonality, and the grazing system will impact on how suitable habitat is for butterflies. Click on again. But clearly undergrazing can be a massive issue. When grassland becomes closed, you don't have as many germination sites for the host plants, and you'll get more coarse grasses, scrub invasion, ultimately abandonment, the same effect as abandonment. But overgrazing has been identified as a key issue for butterflies in Europe. You get that loss of structural diversity, you don't get that variation in sward heights, and whilst the larval host plants might still be there, they're not in the suitable growth form that are required. Click on, please. And I just mentioned briefly about stock type. I mean, if you're restoring, managing and maintaining grasslands, you have to work with the stock that are, that are available with the local landowners. I would just make the point that generally sheep tend to be a lot more selective they will target herbs, the flowering plants, which are host plants for many species. Then they will tackle the fine grasses. It's not to suggest sheep grazing is totally unsuitable. It just means that you have to think that you might have to avoid summer grazing, targeting it in spring, autumn, and winter, or rotationally graze. So they're still a useful tool, but you have to be a bit more careful about how you manage those stock. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. The other thing that's probably worth remembering as well is that you can also create mini habitats, local habitats by mechanical disturbance. And this is an example from the UK where a scrape has been created in chalk downland, which creates a lot more bare ground, and the larval host plants, in this case lotus plants, are recolonizing that quite quickly. So a useful tool to work with too. Next slide, please. Another general principle is about avoiding uniform management. Not, for example, if you're mowing or cutting, do not do it all at once. Try to vary that. Click on, please. And this is especially true in hay meadows. You can vary the cutting dates. You can create local mosaics. Small-scale cutting will actually provide the right conditions to conserve as many butterfly species as possible. Next slide, please. And bear in mind, for a lot of butterflies, well, for some butterflies, habitat mosaics are crucial. They will utilize both, in this case, both grassland and scrub edge habitats. Click on, please. So sometimes they will breed along those edges, or sometimes they will actually need both habitats there by breeding in one of them and then nectar in another. Either way, you need to try and maintain that edge habitat. It is pretty crucial. Next slide, please. Turning to woodlands, shade is often a crucial factor for butterflies in woodlands. So generally speaking, some sort of active woodland management is essential, whether it be coppicing or thinning. Click on, please. And rides or tracks of woodland edges can provide a real diversity of habitat. In this example here, it's showing 3 zones. You've got the grassland to the right, a middle zone of scrub and bracken in this case, and then the high forest to the left there. So that structural diversity is quite important in woodlands. Next slide, please. Okay. Another principle that we should really think about for managing butterflies is metapopulations and managing at a landscape scale. This is particularly important in fragmented landscapes. The basic principle here is that small sites tend to support smaller populations of butterflies, more likely to go extinct. Isolated sites are less likely to, once they become populations become extinct, are less likely to be recolonized. Click on, please. This example, it just shows how we have targeted management across part of a landscape here. There's multiple sites there. And Simona mentioned this. You've got to manage the core sites where the butterfly still is, in the hope that the populations will build big enough to colonize nearby sites, whether they be former sites or potential sites. And you also need to improve the connectivity to maximize the chances of recolonization. This slide shows this targeted management in one landscape for Fabriciana adipae, and you can see an example of the management there. Click on, please. And here, the middle patch of ground is the one we were just looking at in the previous slide. You can see there the blue sites are the ones where the species still occurs. The red are where it's become extinct. The yellow ones are where we've restored habitat and the butterflies recolonized. Click on, please. The main principle here is that if you're doing landscape scale conservation, you really need to restore unoccupied sites that are not too far from your existing populations. The further you go away from the core populations, the less likely you will be to recolonize. In this example, most of the sites were within a kilometre of an occupied site. So it doesn't mean to say that sites that are at a distance won't ever be colonized. It's just the chances of that happening are much less. Okay, click on, please. We produced a report at Butterfly Conservation UK about our experiences of this approach to management. So I would recommend you have a look at that if you're interested to learn more. Next slide, please. So we talked very generally so far. I want to draw your attention to bespoke management for particular species, and for Habitats Directive species, BC Europe has produced, click on please. BC Europe has produced a guidance note, do's and don'ts butterflies of the Habitats Directive. It's well worth looking at that to get some guidance on managing habitats for these butterflies. Click on please. In this example, Materna, Euphorbia materna, I'll just give you a quick run through that. If you click on the next three, please. Yep. Okay, so the guidance explains the habitats of Materna. It then talks about the ecological requirements, which food plants are utilised, and what are the main threats. And then click on, please. And the most important element of it is this table coming up. Click on, please. It identifies those actions which are going to be most useful if you're dealing with a Euphorbia materna site. And it's a series of things to do and the things not to do. So some of the advice for Habitats Directive is limited because we don't always understand the ecology as well as we would like to do. But for others that have been subject to detailed research, then it is provided in detail. So do look at that document. And my last slide, Joseph, I've nearly finished. Next slide, please. I just wanted to brief mention about habitat creation. We haven't really touched on that. We just talked about managing existing habitats. Don't ignore the potential for creating new habitats. Click on again. Basic principle here is that you can, if you've got low nutrient status substrates and you've got a source of local provenance plants, either through green hay or something like that from another nature reserve, you can reseed sites that are in the built environment. And this example, so it's in the UK, this example now supports, click on please, now supports I think half the UK's butterfly species after 6 or 7 years, simply because all of the host plants that they utilise are there. And this is very effective low maintenance habitat, so particularly valuable in the built environment. And of course it improves the connectivity in fragmented landscapes as well. So I think I've just click on again, maybe one more. Oh yeah, there was just an example of one of the species which has successfully colonised that site. So I think please bear in mind there are plenty of opportunities to create new habitat, not just manage existing. So I think I'll stop there, Joseph. Thank you to Thesia for helping me through that. I don't know what happened, why we couldn't share the content, but thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sam. So very pragmatic solution in the end. Of course, you have to stay quicker. Next one, please, quite often. So maybe we have discussion later after Chris' presentation, but there was one question in the chat which I just read to you. So referring to woodland, it was by Bernhard Tyson. Referring to woodland management, are there many brackets countries with environmental management schemes similar to agro-environmental schemes? This would increase nature conservation activities in woodlands. This is more question to the entire audience, I guess, but maybe you have some idea on this, Sam. Are you unmuted?
It certainly makes a difference. If you, I don't know the answer to the question in terms of which other countries have schemes, but it certainly makes a huge difference. It's certainly in the UK where you have environmental schemes, whether it's agricultural scheme, land management, or forestry schemes, to support them, because quite often that kind of work is very, very expensive, and you need the financial support to make it happen.
Okay, thank you. If there are other people who want to comment on this, I'll just use the chat for the answers. It worked very nicely in the last session this morning, so I think it's a good solution, actually. So now I have the pleasure to welcome Chris van Swaay. And I would say, Chris, together with Martin Warren, without the two of you, BC Europe wouldn't exist, at least not as it is right now. So, Chris, the floor is yours about monitoring butterflies. Nice to meet you again here.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start to share my screen. second. If all
Perfect.
went well, you see my full screen now?
Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I will be talking about monitoring of butterflies. My name is Chris van Swaay. Like Joseph said, I work at Dutch BC and I'm Secretary of Butterfly Conservation Europe. So I will focus mostly on the trends of butterflies, both in range and in population. It's good to remember, by the way, that distribution trend can be very different from population trend. Actually, we see that there are butterflies which are expanding their range, so they have a positive distribution trend, mostly probably because of climate change, offering them the opportunity to move north. But at the same time, the population trend can be declining. A population trend is mostly directed by the quality of the habitat. So let's first have a look how good the quality of the monitoring has been. And I simply used the Article 17 reporting of 2019 for that. So in the upper two slides, I simply checked how many species, what percentage of the species had unknown trends. In the left column, you see the population, in the right one, the range. And you can see that also for butterflies, there are many countries where which reported a relatively large part of the species as unknown population trend. For a range trend that was a little bit better, but it's also good to remember that some countries are very green, but for example, Ireland and Portugal just have one habitat directive species, and also the Netherlands only has 3. So you should bear that in mind. But it's a good idea to see how that there is still large gaps in monitoring trends in Europe. Population size in the last Habitat Directive Article 17 reporting was in squares of 1 by 1 kilometer, but I already warned that the population trend can be different from a distribution trend. And of course, these numbers should be compared to the favorable reference value. I didn't hear anything about that yet, but it's good to remember that there is a report on how to apply the favorable reference values for species and habitats. And I guess it will be important for all countries to apply this as well. So, but population trend is what we focus on now. So we have good methods to get the population trends. We can do this by transit counts, and we bring together the data in a central database, that what we usually call the EBMS. Principally, it's a method which follows a standard protocol, and it's good to note that in Europe, most of these are done by expert volunteers, so people who have good knowledge about butterflies and do this in their free time. The method has been very thoroughly scientifically tested. There are loads of papers on this, so and you can use this method to calculate reliable population trend, both on several scales, so both on a regional scale, national scale, by geographical scale, and the whole EU. So here you see a map of where butterfly monitoring was going on 2 years ago. So it has now extended to some extra countries. We hope that by the end of next year, we have butterfly monitoring going on in all EU countries, which is a very important help also for the Article 17 reporting. This gives you an overview of the number of transects we have in Europe. What you get is that you can calculate, in this case I've done for a few of the countries or regions in Europe, the trend for a butterfly species. And you can see that for the Netherlands and the UK, it already started in 1990, and other countries come in later. And in this case, you can see the trend of this species. By the way, you can also see that it seems to be synchronized all over at least the Atlantic region. So we have a butterfly monitoring method which is thoroughly tested, can be done by professionals and volunteers, and we have almost have it going in all EU 27 countries. It's also important that in the ABLE project we were able to not only build on a centralized database, but also that we have a website in which you can enter data, and that we have a smartphone apps ready, which means that any new countries who want to join in with butterfly monitoring will be very easy to do. It's good to remember that monitoring is a long-term commitment. We have this is really vital. We have noticed in the ABLE project and in the Spring project that it's always important to have national or regional contact persons which can sustain long-term monitoring. It is important that there is feedback for the volunteers and that there is somebody organizing everything. There is a website, butterflymonitoring.net, where you can, sorry, I don't know why my phone keeps going. Let's move on. What we get is species trends like this species, which is declining all over Europe. Another species, though, is increasing. So this Argynnis paphia is a species you can see more and more over the whole continent, and the species is doing relatively well. So, of course, we have this kind, and we can build indicators with the different trends for butterflies. In this case, you see the two main indicators. To the left, the grassland butterfly indicator, which shows a decline over Europe, and on the right hand, the woodland butterfly indicator. These are just two examples. Interesting, by the way, is that the woodlands indicator is going up in the last 10 years or so, which is something we see in many countries and many regions. Woodland butterflies are doing relatively well compared to grassland butterflies. And there can be all kinds of reasons for that. For example, most woodlands get older, there is more woodland, but of course also abandonment of grassland leads at the end to more woodland, providing more habitat. We also have to look at distribution. I think that the main message is that each country should stimulate citizen science as much as possible and use open data wherever possible. GBIF is a very easy way to exchange information. So upload data as much as possible to GBIF, make it open, and on the other hand, use information, because even in many of the Eastern and Southern European countries where there might be less information available, remember that many people go there on holidays, so there might be much more data in GBIF than is available in your own country. It's also important to note that if you do a distribution analysis and you just do this professionally, so you just send professionals to the populations which are known, you probably only will show declines, because you're not very likely to find new populations, because the professionals only go where you pay them to go. So really, I would very much say try to focus on collecting information, using open systems, add of course your own data yourself as well. Some examples of in this map you see the distribution of Phengaris arion, and I just used the two last Article 17 reports, and in green you see in red you see the distribution of this species in the period 2006-2012, and in green you see the ones that were only found in the last period, and in blue you see them for both. And it's really an interesting map to look at, because apparently Bulgaria in the first reporting period colored the whole country as for this species, and in the next one they only found it in a few areas. But also look at France in the southwest, where apparently the species has either been expanding in the region of Bordeaux, but or it was not reported in the first period. Anyway, these things are really interesting and are already available. I also want to shed light very short on the 15-minute counts, because it's to be able for the future to use the data as good as possible. So you have to work on the standardized monitoring, but it would be very important that you try to get other people to do counts like the 50-minute counts, in which we use both. We know the area which is counted and the time which is counted, which is also an app. It's part of the Butterfly Count app, which is also available for stand-up monitoring. And it really supplies some very useful data on news sites, which can be used for all kinds of data analysis later on. This is just an example of a transect I walked last summer in the French Alps. So when we look at what's available at the moment, it's good to see that we have incidental records and complete lists, which we can use for distribution data, but we need good transects to get good information on the population trends of butterflies. So I think that any country which has not joined the EBMS yet, or has not have butterfly monitoring going yet, should join in, and it's very easy to contact us over either by email or by the website butterflymonitoring.net. And the 50-minute count gives some very valuable information in between population trends and distribution trends. So the message I want to give to the policymakers is try to arrange that you get national and regional coordinators. I would very much advise you to focus on citizen science. With butterflies, that's possible. They're very popular. We know a lot about them, and there are a lot of people who want to join in. You can work with the BCE partners. We have partners in almost all countries, and anyway in all EU countries. And it's very easy, also if you don't have butterfly monitoring going on now, to join via the EBMS. You can go to butterflymonitoring.net for more information. There's a website available, there's a database available, there's an app available. So it's very easy to join and get the things going. And I always advise everybody to use and produce open data. I also want to point to this book. I haven't heard about it yet. It's not that old. It's actually just 1 or 2 years old. And it's a book which gives a lot of information on how to monitor habitats and sites, but also other important information. The PDF can be downloaded from the site of Ecologic. So that might be a very valuable addition to many people who are looking for more information. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Great presentation. Also in time, perfect. So now it's a chance for questions. So please raise your hand or write in the chat. So there was a nice discussion about rewilding and related issues with Irma and Stanek and Matthias Dolek and Pavel and others. So that's nice, and I think you just can read it there. Questions to Chris and also to Sam, of course. So the floor is yours. So please raise your hand. Why are you considering to ask a question? I may just add, based on the Butterfly Conservation Europe approaches on the butterflies, we are also trying to enlarge this for the entire pollination topic. And I might just put a link into the chat in a short moment. But there we use the big experience just characterized by Chris on monitoring of butterflies, especially the volunteer part, but also the part of open science and open data, for example. Okay, so now I've tried to bridge some minutes for asking people to ask questions. Everything's crystal clear, or?
Perfect.
So I can't see any, at least, but normally I would see them on the screen here if there are some. So you may use just the raise hand function if you have questions here. If this is not the case, oh yeah, Stefan, Go ahead, please. Stefan Schindler.
Hi, this was a very nice presentation. Thank you. In Austria, at the federal level, covering the whole country, we have two kinds of monitorings running, which cover butterflies. One is Article 11 monitoring for the Habitats Directive. And there, as you know, with these specific parameters, specific species get searched for and mapped. In another one, we have a random sample of 2,000 plots across the agricultural lands of Austria, from eastern arable lands up to mountain pastures. And in this random sample, we take all species and that we have following a specific sampling scheme. So my question would be, with the method that you presented with the Transact, that I'm a little bit familiar with, I mean, maybe we can also discuss this then in the specific workshop for the member states tomorrow. But my question would be how to combine things in the best way, or how to merge it, or if you would recommend that a third system, this system that you suggest with the Transacts, is needed, or if we find a way to switch, or so. I would like to have such kind of discussion at least tomorrow in the breakout group for the member states.
Yeah, I can give a very short answer. Try to give a short answer. Anyway, it's always good to remember that if you have a random sample of sites, you probably have a good chance of missing the rare ones or the species which are of conservation concern. And the problem is that if you only visit the sites which have rare species or which have habitat directive species, you for one, you might miss new locations, but also you always have the danger of looking at the same spots all over again. Yeah. So anyway, but I know there is in Tyrol, so in the western part, there is monitoring going on using the Transact method. So I think there is, and certainly in Austria, there is future for this growing over the whole country. Yeah.
Thank you. I totally agree. This is why we also these two systems that I explained are complementary. So the Habitats Directive monitoring system is focusing on the specific species, and the other one is trying to get the common species. And our colleague Johannes is here in the workshop, so we are in contact also for this the Transacts that they are doing in Western Austria. But thanks for this suggestion. Thank you, and hope to meet you tomorrow in the breakout group for Austria. I think it's tomorrow at 1. Yeah.
Okay, next one is Frank Fassen.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a comment and a suggestion because, I mean, first of all, I think it's clear that in the last years we have seen a significant increase in the collection of systematic data, the Transacts, and I think this could be further reinforced in the coming years. And I would just like to draw a parallel to another community, which is the birds community, where indeed we are now in the situation that we are covering a significant part of Europe by systematic list sampling, but they have also identified geographic gaps. And now in the next step, and there is likely to be EU support for this in the coming years, they will focus on filling in these gaps and really looking for people to look at particular those areas where there are still gaps in the systematic sampling. And I think what is really encouraging is that we can see really a progress, and this is almost continuous. And I think there is really a potential to continue that work, to go even further in terms of really having a very good coverage of all the EU territory in terms of systematic data sampling. And you know that very often it's really the richest areas where we have the least people who are collecting systematic data. So just a suggestion for the next year. Thank you.
No, thank you, Frank. Now, next one is Primož from Slovakia.
Yes, hello to everyone. I'm Primož from Slovenia, actually.
Slovenia, okay, sorry.
Okay, it's okay. I have a question for Sam. Are there any guidelines about grazing which concern number of livestock on the field? let's say, number of livestock per hectare, especially for some species as Fengaris teleus or Euphydrias aurinea. In our country, conservation of butterflies depends mainly on measures of common agriculture policy. So when we try to form these measures, we avoid grazing, mainly because we do not have any data, we don't have any experience with grazing. And so if there are any guidelines or any informations about this, thank you.
So we're waiting for Sam, I guess, no?
Sam is muted, as I see.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I'm back. Yeah, so if you look at the do's and don'ts guidance, there is some in there, but and all in the UK we've produced guidance specific to habitats here. To be honest, there isn't a lot out there. We do need more research on what the impact is of different grazing regimes. The one thing I would say is that you can never, it's not terribly useful to give grazing pressures as livestock units because it varies so much according to the habitat that you're managing. What might work on one type of habitat won't work on another, and even within a habitat you'll get a tremendous amount of variation. So the practice that we've evolved here is to actually talk to the landowners, so the land managers who have experience of grazing these habitats are the best place to start. And quite often the butterflies that are still present are there because of the previous historical management. So that would be my starting point. But I certainly do not avoid grazing. Don't be frightened of trying it. It does require some skills to develop, but it is worthwhile in the long term.
Okay, thank you. Next one is Pavel Adamski and then Irma Wienhoff. So, Pavel, are you there? I don't hear anything. So maybe it doesn't work.
Shall I then jump into the gap?
Yes, Irma, jump into the gap, yes.
I wanted to add something about the grazing. The problem with grazing is that it is so very, the effects are so very different depending on the climate where you do it. So in a certain region, it might be very valuable to do some grazing, for instance, in wet meadows, but in others, it's absolutely not done to keep exactly the same species community of butterflies. So it's really important that when it comes to grazing to have a look at the very local conditions.
Okay, thanks, Irma. So, Pavel, can we give it one more try? I know from before the connection was very weak, so somehow unstable. Now, maybe, Pavel, are you there? Now you're muted, it seems. Or maybe you type it into the... Pavel just wrote okay, whatever this means, but maybe if there's something else, you just write in the chat.
I will say.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay. Okay, he writes in the chat. It's a really weak connection now. We can see you at the moment. Maybe one more try, Pavel, by talking. Maybe just give it one more try. Oh, he's typing now.
Maybe switch the video off.
Okay, he's typing. He will type the question. Okay, so we can go ahead. Thank you very much. And I think now just one more point. We won't have a Mentimeter later, but if you didn't yet fill in the question on the criteria, you might still do so on the Mentimeter, so that we can use it as a basis for discussion at around 12 o'clock, so after the next presentation, just as a kind of reminder. So we go ahead now with the French National Species Action Plan and setting priorities for butterfly species by Xavier and Camille. So the floor is yours. Please go ahead, Xavier and Camille.
Good morning, everybody. It's okay for the sound? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. It's not very loud, I can hear. Okay, now the presentation is there, so just try, go ahead.
It's okay for the screen?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. So we are very glad to present you the French National Action Plan for endangered butterfly. We will do it with two voices. My colleague Camille from French National Museum, working for French Office for Biodiversity, is working to the reporting of the Habitats Directive. And I, Xavier, from the Office for the Insect and Environment, working for coordinating insect conservation program. And first, we can have an alert in France today about a strong decline of some butterfly, thanks to the establishment of an observatory of the loss of species at departmental scale. As you can see on your screen, for a century in France, the loss has been terrible for many species. This is a territorial loss in the France, and you can see minus 78 for Ophelia matrona, for example, minus 48 for Lopinga achine. It's really a big problem in France. The French government had decided to expand its national policy for the preservation of butterfly after the publication of the French Red List and following the success of a first tiny plan only focused on Phengaris maculinea species. Overall, all French departments have lost at least one species of butterfly, and 6 species of butterfly out of 10 have lost at least the surface of an area equivalent to a French department. It's very terrific. So, what is a national action plan in France? It's a kind of legal framework to have objective to stop decline of endangered butterfly. You can find this in this document 10 years of implementation in a few action sheets for many species priority in France. The first action is the deployment of this policy in all French regions. And after 2 years of assessment and collective writing, we began the plan, and each French region must appropriate the objective and implement current action adopted for each biological context. Today, we have 2 questions about protective perimeters. And in France, we have scientific results that sites managed and protected for biodiversity are home on most of population of threatened butterflies. And sites managed for the presentation of biodiversity are refuge and areas reservoir for maintaining butterfly population. And as you can see, it's good in the French reserve. It's not so bad in the French reserve, but it's very bad in other territory. And there is 2 key actions for consistency in our plan. First, action number 9, it's articulate the different conservation policy at regional scale. This is the top priority in France. And action number 10, this is about sustainable management, ecological management. It's about grazing, cutting, farming, and forestry, top priority species. It's Camille time. If you can continue, please.
Yes, thank you, Xavier. So, as Xavier just said, the plan is a document which summarizes the actions to be taken and focusing mainly at the regional level. But it also allows us to make the link with existing national or international strategies. And the first example for us is our National Protected Areas Strategy, which was published last year and aims to meet the targets set in the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, so the protected areas targets. And to this end, we developed maps to identify the most suitable areas on which protected areas could be created or extended. So the idea is to have a regard to the diversity of species, the hotspots, the importance of the sites, and considering the pressures and the current network of protected areas, we can decide where concretely should we create or extend the protected areas. And this work and the actions that are developed within the Butterflies action plans actually allows us to get more precise and recent data, especially on the species distribution and population strength, which are very useful to draw this kind of maps and kind of work. You can switch to the next one, thank you. So the National Action Plan for Butterflies is a tool for our French policies, but also to contribute to the other European target, which is the conservation status 1 on the Habitats Directive species. So all the Habitats Directive species are covered by the national plan. And especially the national plan makes it possible to have a structured and coordinated network of local operators which are involved in butterfly conservation, which is very useful and necessary to be mobilized, for example, to get more precise data and expert knowledge on the conservation status in order to reduce the still remaining few unknown assessments in the conservation status or in the trends, as we saw before. But this is an ongoing work, and it needs to be maintained so that the dynamics continue. And to that end, the national plan really helps us to do the coordination of this network of experts. And also, it helps us, if you can switch back, sorry, to the previous slides. It also helps us to assess the necessary level of ambition, which is necessary to improve the conservation status or trends of species. So here we see 2 species for which, with our experts, we analyze that a really strong inflection in the policies or the means allowed is necessary so that we can hope to improve the conservation status, which relies mostly on protecting the habitat of the species. And then on the next one, the work in preparing the national conservation status pledges also helps us identifying the main conservation measures. So we saw a lot of them in the previous presentations, but with these networks of experts, we could identify the main useful ones for each species. And for most of them, it relies on adapting agricultural practices, especially on water management in grassland, and also improving the knowledge and stakeholder consultations, which a few actions of the plan are dedicated to. So in the study, we identified measures for each species, but the idea is also to analyze them in a combined way so that the scope of the measure is more global and we can analyze the results we expect them to be more coherent if we treat the whole species group together in the measure approached. So I think this is all for us. Thank you very much. I hope it was clear enough, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So you have been very quick, actually. So we have more time for discussion. So first of all, there's no more Mentimeter, so you still can complete the one I mentioned before on the criteria. And now we can go directly into, well, questions for your presentation on the French example, I would say. So maybe you just remove the sharing of the slides. And then may I ask people for comments, discussions, other experiences from other countries. Just feel free, whatever you like to ask. And also, of course, it's always worth reading the chat about the previous discussions on wilderness, on methodologies, etc. And there was also one hint, by the way, from Axel Schimank on a good handbook on pasturing practice in Germany, by the way. Okay, so questions, please go ahead. There's still no one here. So just use the raise hand function on the bottom. Then I can see. And I hope I can see everybody. Sue, you want to? Yes, Sue, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Xavier and Camille. That was really interesting, and your coordinated approach, both horizontally and vertically, is very, very interesting and productive. And I noticed that you highlight in your actions adapting agricultural practices, including water management, and of course that is something that can be achieved through CAP strategic plans, and the paths that Frank referred to need to identify the money required and how it's going to be deployed. So do you consult with your landowners and occupiers? I see you say stakeholder consultation and awareness raising. So if you could comment a bit more on how you are achieving results, that would be really interesting.
So Camille, Xavier, one of you want to respond?
Sorry, I don't really understand the
Xavier, you are have identified actions to improve the conservation of these butterfly species, and you highlighted agricultural practices.
Yes.
So do you have a good dialogue on CAP strategic plans, for instance?
Yes, we have a good dialogue, but it's a long way. It's a long way to have a final action with agriculture partnerships. But we have a good dialogue, and 10 is not is not enough sometimes, but dialogue is here.
Great.
So thank you, Xavier. Any more comments or questions on this? Which seems not to be the case. So thank you very much for your impressive results from France. Well, impressive. It shows a lot of negative trends, which is kind of impressive, but in the very negative side, of course. I found interesting also that species like Lysina dispar are declining. Well, it was only a kind of, let's say, a certain loss of occurrences, but it seems in some places it was increasing, at least in recent years. What's the overall trend? Do you have any experience? The trend is negative, but it's kind of more or less stable. What can you say about this species?
It's stable at a departmental scale, but it's only one spot in each department, and so it's very negative for population trend.
Okay.
We are very poor for population trend in France because BMS, DMS, and EBMS are not very strong in our country. And this is one of the objective of the new plan to have a better BMS and better European survey to study that.
So what would be your wishes to improve the EBMS? I mean, from the French side, is there any chance you can imagine from government or local governments or something like this? Is there any kind of ideal world you can think of?
Yes, we have many volunteers, but nobody can coordinate. And we have to coordinate and to deploy the animation, you know, moving to have data communication with coordinator. And now we have a lot of volunteers, but not very much data in database in the museum. This is a problem.
Mm-hmm. So what you're missing is the kind of the link between the volunteers and the professionals,
Yes,
something like this.
Developing more link.
Mm. So let's see how we can really encourage some more of the traditional entomological communities, but sometimes they're more focused on their specialities, of course. So from Germany, I know that we have lots of, let's say, also people working as kind of impact assessment people who live by this, but also find some time for regional coordination. That's the solution we have mostly, and it works quite nicely. But I don't know, the situation is in France actually concerning this one. Interesting to know that this is the gap you have there. So you have enough volunteers, but you need people to bring them together and to guide them to a certain extent. And I guess it's difficult centrally from France, it's a big country, no?
Yes.
Irma.
Just speaking about getting more volunteers to count butterflies and do transects and maybe 50-minute counts, we are very much willing to help you and to cooperate more with the French system. So just if you feel like it, just send us an email to Christina, to me, to whomever here, and we are really very much looking forward to working together with you on that.
Yes, thanks. We have a meeting planned with Reto, and it's very fine. You have already make contact with you.
Very nice. Looking forward to meeting you more often.
Thank you. And Simona has a question. Simona, please.
It's time just to comment in countries like Italy or France, where biodiversity is so huge in terms of number of species, and we host a large number of habitat-directed species. In Italy, we have 16, for example. Butterfly monitoring scheme is crucial, but it's not enough. You have to think to combine two different networks. A butterfly monitoring scheme as spread as possible, but in that case, only few of the habitat-directed species will be monitored. And so you have also to work in parallel with a national action plan, a national monitoring plan for habitat-directed species. What I suggest is to try to use the same methodology as much as possible. So, and to put some BMS transect that are community transect in which walking you count each species in places where there is also an habitat-directed species, but you have also to do some extra work because we have too many different species, and also some habitats of directed species are not so commonly walked by citizens. But work parallelly, try to put together as much as possible the two plans. It's not easy. It's a very large amount of work, but we need it, I think. Just a suggestion.
Yes.
Not in Italy is not established that, but we have been working on the two. Okay.
It's a
Thank you so much.
idea. We are very close to Italy in the field, and one of the problems is in France, volunteers making survey for butterfly are not scientists. They are not conservators. They are not ecologists. They are just fan of butterfly. And so we must make a lot of link and a lot of pedagogy to explain how to conserve and to make action for butterfly.
Sue?
Yes, Xavier, we in the ABLE project and now in part of the Spring project have developed resources that help you with volunteers. So we run workshops, training workshops with the national lead, and we have developed targeted identification guides that are PDF downloadable for specific sets of species that occur in different national parks. For instance, we have 3 or 4 for Italy. So we're very happy to work with you to increase those and help you to train your volunteers. And so I look forward to the results of your discussions with Reto and others, and hopefully the sustainability and the growth of the scheme can be developed during the Spring project and then be sustained. The crucial thing to keep going is some support from national governments for the coordination and validation and data management side. It's very cost effective for national governments to provide some support to part-time coordinators in regions, and so we would advocate that as part of a sustained plan, and then they can reach out to the volunteers, feedback to them, show them how the data is being used, and ultimately help to inspire the conservation actions.
It's on good way. I have good hope to do that.
Okay, thank you, Sue, and thank you, Xavier, for this ones. And I think it shows the way, the direction we want to take, of course, to encourage all people who are also here in this meeting, but also the broader, let's say, audience, the broader community, I would say, from the member states and also from our, let's say, butterfly enthusiasts and pollinator people to really, let's say, move along a joint way for the future. So, and I think that's a very good start here for this meeting. So for the last point of today, so thank you, Xavier.
There's an additional question, I think, to Xavier or Camille, explaining how the French system supports the national action plans. I think it was a question in the chat and has been recalled by Christina.
From Miguel, okay.
Yes, I see the question in the chat.
Thanks.
In France, we have money from the French ministry to coordinate at a national scale, but in each region there is an envelope, there is a budget to coordinate the plan and to write objectives and to make reunions to make a plan at regional scale. So it's very good. It's about 20,000 euro by region. It's not enough, but it's very nice to begin and to have a structure to begin to work.
If I may add something, maybe on the French system, if you allow me. Yes, I worked, before I joined the Commission, I worked for some time at regional level also in France. And well, national action plans for species are regulatory tools in France. They are in the environmental code, and they are one of the tools for protection of biodiversity and for working on conservation. So that's why there is financing from the national level. And what's quite interesting is that it also coincides very often with the work that's being done on Natura 2000. So there is this system that's transversal, horizontal, so to speak, working on certain species in France with a broad strategy like the action plan at national level that is declined then at regional level. And this coincides with what's being done site by site, for example, on Natura 2000, but also on nature reserves. So the financing can come from national funds, but it can also come from European funds when, for example, some actions are implemented on some sites that also coincide with objectives and measures that are designed for Natura 2000 sites.
Okay, merci, Sophie.
Thanks a lot, Sophie.
Okay, that's quite helpful, I think, this information. Did I miss any other comments in the chat? There's much going on there, but I think we got it now mainly. If there's no more question on this, but it leads us directly into the final part of today, of this morning at least. It's about this criteria, which I mostly use for preparing both pledges. So Theo, you can maybe just bring in again the result of this Mentimeter, which is on which criteria you feel are most suitable for member states. Theo, how many people did now participate in this one?
67.
67, so
the majority.
Majority, it's the absolute majority, which is great. And you can see the two leading ones, the umbrella effect, which is somehow, let's say, summarizing this, what I said in the beginning. We do not only think about the butterflies, but there might be good umbrellas or good targets to or indicators to really achieve improvements. And also followed very closely by species of highest immediate risk of extinction. So the second one is surely focusing on the species itself, and the first one on the whole community, so to say. So I think these are the two more quite important components. So for this one now, well, I think this criteria will be applied in different contexts in different ways. So it would be one way or one chance now to maybe get your comments from different nations, different countries, different member states. What is your take on this kind of criteria? So we have a kind of a time for some discussion on this criteria issue. Those of you who feel like, just raise your hands and make your comments or ask your questions. So far, we can just, let's say, we just noticed the priorities, which from my point of view looks great actually. But how are the things done in practice would be nice to see or nice to know. So especially member state representatives, if you have some kind of information on this, it would be great.
And these are, of course, criteria for the status improvement targets, but perhaps some countries think rather about the area targets with which they want to approach the butterflies. So we could widen into that as well.
If there is nothing to discuss here, maybe it's better now than in the breakout groups, of course, the next 2 days, so today and tomorrow. And there was one chat in information or question about Group C is tomorrow 1:30 to 3:30. And just Chris asked, we should to confirm this. I think it can be confirmed, no? Yeah. So just confirmed. Okay, so that's solved. So if this is not a topic to discuss right now, we can also go into general discussion. So Theo, the last Mentimeter we do at the very end, right?
Yes, but people can fill it in already. It's more what 3 words, well, best reflect the feelings about this meeting today.
Okay. So, but now it's the floor is open for any kind of, let's say, comments, questions you have, things you want to raise, either for the meeting today, this morning, also in preparation for the next 2 days. If you have questions there, just go ahead. I just noticed some people had to leave already. I think it's past 12:15. So if there's nothing more, I would just say And if I haven't missed anything, trying to follow the chat, I think it looks okay. Then I would say, well, we go to the wrap up of this meeting. So I hope this meeting this morning gave some kind of good overview of the things which are happening across Europe and the things we are doing at Butterfly Conservation Europe, but also activities going on in some of the countries. And as I expressed before, I hope that we really can get closer to each other. And I also hope very much that the whole issues of pledges will, let's say, get some kind of speed in the next months, so we really can achieve something across the European Union. And I think there are different options for different countries. Some can do more, some can do less. But if we can have some leading by example, would always be very nice and very good to have, of course. So I think the French example we saw just a while ago, it's a good thing to look at. I also think Germany has some, let's say, nice things stories to tell, at least. Well, I'm biased as a German, of course, so I think Germany does good things as well. I guess in the breakout sessions then this afternoon and tomorrow, there will be 3 in total. We can get closer to, let's say, concrete ideas and actions. And I hope this all will be embedded in this big issue of, in the end, in transformative change, so that we can achieve something on the ground, which is embedded into the big questions we have to face, the big answers we have to find for making our environment and our biodiversity and our livelihood sustainable. With these few words, maybe I can, let's say, ask Frank for some wrap up. Frank Fast from the DG.
Yes, thank you very much, Joseph. Now we are coming to the end of a plenary, but keep in mind, it's not the end of the event. We are going into 3 highly interactive sessions this afternoon and tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon. And I hope you all know in which session you are going. Now, I would like to, first of all, I would like to thank you very much, Butterfly Conservation Europe, for volunteering to host this very first specific event for the pledge and review process. And we hope to have other events in the coming months on other species groups. Thank you very much, Joseph, for sharing. Thank you very much as well to Theo van der Sluis and his team from Wageningen University for the technical support and the assistance of BCE in the organization of the event. Thank you very much for Tisia, who has been working in the background and who has been managing WebEx. Now, we would of course hope that this event will help the member states to prepare ambitious pledges for the benefit of protected butterfly species, but also for the habitats. And I think we noted very often today the particular challenges that we have with the conservation of grasslands all over Europe. All our data show that grasslands and the species related to them are in the worst situation in terms of conservation status, many of which are declining. We also talked very much about the umbrella effect, so the potential to use butterflies as umbrella species for the wider biodiversity of these important habitats. Now, I said this is the first of a number of events, and we will hope that in the future we will have additional events. We started with the butterflies for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a challenging group. It's really one that is in perhaps one of our biggest conservation priorities, looking at the status and trends together with their grassland habitat. But we were also very lucky to have Butterfly Conservation Europe as a federation of experts and conservationists interested in the conservation of butterflies. And you might know that for other species groups, unfortunately, we often are missing this kind of stakeholder or interlocutor that could help us to work on this. For example, we don't have any fish life conservation Europe, and there's still some groups on which we really don't have a good organization at an EU level. So for us, this is the first of a series of events, and we are now going into the more challenging ones where it will become more difficult to bring the stakeholders together. Now, maybe let me just say a few words about the intentions that we have for the next months. Of course, we want to keep the ball rolling on the preparation of the pledges, and I think the muteness of the member states at the end of the event shows that, in fact, we are just at the start of a process, and it's a very challenging process to develop these pledges. So it is a highly ambitious process, and we would of course expect that the pledges are submitted by the end of this year, which is in itself a big challenge. On our side, we are preparing an electronic reporting format for the pledges that should be ready by the mid of this year, hopefully. And then for the end of the year, when the pledges are submitted, we also intend to have dashboards in place where the pledges can be consulted, can be viewed, also in view of triggering a positive competition for ambition and for complete pledges by the member states. And then in the course of the next year, we are planning the biogeographical seminars to review the pledges. So this is where we stand for the moment. And yeah, I cannot insist more. We know it's a very challenging issue. It's ambitious for all of us. It is also about mobilizing resources, about mobilizing funding. So with all this, I would like to thank you once more. And I think it's very good also to see that we had such a good attendance today. I see that even now we are still at almost 110 participants. So I think from that perspective, we can be very optimistic about the mobilization of pledges and ambitious objectives for the preservation of our butterflies and grasslands in Europe. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Frank. Just two last points. There was the question, will the results or topics of discussions of the breakout sessions be available for all participants? I guess that's something we are going to strive for, I assume. And please fill in the Mentimeter last question with the 3 words describing the best event of this morning. So this is just 2 technical things, but quite important, I think, in the end for us to have some feedback as well. So thank you, everybody. So thank you, Frank. Thanks to all who joined us here today. And let's meet each other again in different breakout groups this afternoon or tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon. Looking forward to some productive interactions. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch break. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you.